In the quiet streets of a suburban neighborhood, there was a girl named Sarah. She wasn't the most popular, and she certainly didn't stand out. She had soft brown hair that fell just past her shoulders and bright green eyes that looked almost too big for her small face. To most people, Sarah was invisible, but she wasn't the type of girl who craved attention. She had her own world, one that no one else seemed to understand. Every day, Sarah would walk the same path to school. She didn't mind the loneliness. In fact, she preferred it. The crowded halls, the whispers, the laughter, all of it felt distant to her. She had learned early on that it was easier to stay quiet and unnoticed, and she liked it that way. But there was something about Sarah that no one knew. Deep inside her, beneath the layers of silence and solitude, there was a fire, an unspoken strength. She was calm, always composed, even when the world around her seemed to fall apart. People would sometimes notice her stillness, the way she didn't flinch when others tried to bother her. But they didn't know why. That morning, like every other, Sarah walked to school with her head down, her backpack swinging at her side. The sun was shining, and the birds were chirping, but Sarah felt nothing. She had grown used to the emptiness. As she walked past the familiar houses, her mind wandered to the thoughts she never spoke aloud. She often wondered if anyone could see her for who she really was, or if she would always remain a shadow in the background. But today was different. As she neared the corner, she saw a group of boys standing near the entrance to her school. They were laughing, shouting, and pushing each other around, as boys often do. Sarah had learned to avoid them, but today they noticed her. "Hey, look who it is," one of the boys called out. "The quiet girl who thinks she's too good for us." Sarah didn't respond. She kept walking, hoping they would lose interest. But they didn't. The leader of the group, a boy named Jake, stepped in front of her, blocking her path. "Where are you going, huh?" Jake sneered, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Sarah's heart beat faster, but she didn't show it. She looked up at him with calm eyes, as if she were looking through him. The other boys gathered around, waiting for something to happen. They all expected her to react, maybe get angry, maybe cry. But Sarah didn't do anything. She just stood there, silent, her expression unreadable. "You know, no one really likes you, right?" Jake continued, his voice growing louder. "You think you're better than us just because you keep your mouth shut." Sarah said nothing. She could feel their eyes on her, feel the weight of their words pressing down on her, but she didn't let it show. She had learned a long time ago that silence was her shield. If she didn't respond, if she didn't let them see how much their words hurt, then they would get bored and move on. But Jake wasn't finished. He reached out and grabbed her backpack, yanking it from her shoulder. Sarah's body tensed, but her face remained calm. She didn't fight back, didn't scream. She just stood there, watching as Jake waved the backpack in the air like a trophy. "Come on, what's the matter, quiet girl? Why don't you speak up? Show us you're not afraid," Jake taunted. For a moment, Sarah felt the anger rise within her, but she buried it deep inside. She knew better than to give in to it. Instead, she reached out slowly, calmly, and took the backpack from Jake's hands. There was no rush, no urgency in her movements. She simply looked at him with the same stillness she had always carried. "You're not worth my time," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. The words hit harder than anything she could have said louder. The group of boys stared at her in shock, not knowing how to respond. They had expected a fight, a burst of emotion, something they could laugh at. But all they got was a girl who wasn't afraid of them. For a moment, there was silence, and then the group of boys began to laugh. But it wasn't a laugh of victory. It was awkward, unsure. They didn't know how to handle someone who wasn't scared, someone who didn't react the way they expected. The rest of Sarah's school day passed quietly. No one talked to her. No one asked her how she was. It had always been that way. But something inside her had shifted since that morning. She wasn't sure what it was. Her steps felt heavier, but her heart felt stronger. As she walked home alone, her eyes stayed low, but her ears were open. She heard laughter from across the street. Jake and his group again. They were standing near a corner store, making jokes, probably about her again. She didn't care. Not anymore. She passed them without looking, but one of them called out, "Hey, Sarah, gonna go cry to your daddy now?" Sarah stopped. She didn't turn around. She simply kept walking, but her fingers curled into tight fists at her side. Her father. They didn't know anything about him. To them, he was just a tired old man who stayed inside their small broken house at the end of the street. They didn't know the truth. No one did. Not even the teachers. Not even the principal. Her father had made her promise to never speak of his past. "Some people sleep better not knowing," he used to say. But that night, everything began to change. Sarah opened the front door and stepped into the small house. The smell of old wood and warm tea greeted her. Her father was sitting at the table, cleaning a small metal box, an old radio that hadn't worked in years. "You're home early," he said without looking up. "I didn't stay for math club," Sarah replied softly. He nodded. Something happened. She hesitated, then shook her head. "No, just didn't feel like it." He finally looked at her. His eyes were sharp, deep gray, like a storm. But they were kind, too. Sarah always wondered how someone could have such dangerous eyes and still look gentle. He studied her face for a moment, then returned to the radio. "You were like your mother today," he said. Sarah frowned. "What do you mean?" "Still, strong, didn't show pain. But I see it." She looked down, unsure of what to say. Her mother had died when Sarah was only 6. She barely remembered her, except for the soft songs she used to hum at night. "Did someone at school hurt you?" he asked calmly. Sarah paused. "They tried, but I didn't let them." He gave a small smile. "That's my girl." She sat down across from him. "Why don't they know who you really are?" His smile faded. His fingers froze over the radio. "It's better this way," he said. "The quiet life is the safest life." Sarah looked him in the eye. "But it's not safe. Not really. Not anymore." Her father leaned back, silent. He looked out the window, where the last bits of sunlight touched the cracked sidewalk. He didn't speak for a long time. Then, quietly, he said, "There are things I've done. Things I've seen. I left that world behind for a reason, Sarah. I chose peace. For you. But what if peace won't stay?" she asked. He looked at her again. This time, his eyes were colder, sharper. "If they ever come close, too close, I won't let them touch you. Not even for a second." She believed him. Every word. That night, Sarah had trouble sleeping. Her mind kept playing Jake's voice over and over. His laugh. His cruel words. She had ignored bullies for years. But this time, it was different. This time, they were going too far. The next morning, her father wasn't at the table. She found him in the basement. It was rare for him to go down there. Even more rare to see the old trunk opened. He was holding a long black case. It looked heavy. "What's that?" Sarah asked, standing at the door. He didn't answer at first. He opened the case slowly. Inside was something she had never seen before, at least, not in real life. A black SWAT vest. Old, faded, but still solid, still ready. Beneath it lay a silver badge. And next to that, a gun. Her father looked up. "This used to be my life. I told myself I'd never touch it again. But I have a feeling. Something's coming." Sarah's heart beat fast. "Why now?" "Because people are watching you," he said. "And when they can't break you, they try to scare you, hurt you. That's what bullies do. But they forget one thing." He walked past her and gently touched her shoulder. "They forget who protects you." Later that day, Sarah walked to school again. The sun was out. The same group of boys were there. And again, They tried to get her attention. But she wasn't the same. She looked straight ahead, confident, calm, the quiet girl who didn't blink. And watching from a parked car not far away was her father. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't angry. He was just watching. Like a soldier guarding a city. The boys didn't know it yet, but they had made a very big mistake. They had threatened the wrong girl, and her father was done hiding. End of part 2. It started with a note. Sarah opened her locker the next day and found a small folded paper stuck between her books. There was no name on it, just one sentence written in red ink. Tell your dad to stay out of it, or else. She stood there, frozen. The hallway was noisy, full of students talking and laughing. But to Sarah, everything went quiet. The note felt cold in her hand. Her eyes scanned the hallway, but she didn't see anyone watching. That night, she gave the note to her father without saying a word. He read it once, then again. Slowly, he folded it and placed it in his pocket. I was afraid of this, he said in a calm voice. They're not just kids anymore. Sarah sat across from him, her hands shaking. What do they want? Why are they doing this? He didn't answer right away. He poured 2 cups of tea and handed one to her. They want fear, he said. Control. And when someone doesn't break, they push harder. But why me? She whispered. Because they think you're alone, he said. But they're wrong. That night, her father made a phone call. He stepped outside, stood under the old streetlight, and dialed a number he hadn't used in years. A deep voice answered on the 3rd ring. Commander, the voice said. Not anymore, he replied. There was a pause. You only call when it's serious. It is. He explained the situation, how threats had begun, how kids were being used, how someone dangerous was hiding behind them. We need to know who's behind this, he said. I need names. The voice promised to help. Within 24 hours, files were delivered to their house in an unmarked envelope. Inside were photos. One of them showed Jake's older brother, Troy, a known gang runner, connected to weapons, drugs. He had recently returned from jail and was hiding in the city. Sarah's father now understood everything. Jake was just a tool. Troy was the one pulling strings. Meanwhile, Jake sat in a dark room, his brother pacing behind him. Troy was tall, full of tattoos, his face cold. You told me she was just a girl, Troy growled. She is, just a quiet kid. Barely talks, Jake replied. But her dad, you said he's nobody. You sure about that? Jake hesitated. I mean, he looks like nobody. Troy threw a chair across the room. Looks mean nothing. That man used to be SWAT. Do you know what that means? Jake's face went pale. What? You didn't tell me. Because I didn't know. Troy snapped. But I know now. And that changes everything. Troy lit a cigarette, then looked at Jake with cold eyes. If this man finds out what I'm doing, we're done. Understand? Jake nodded quickly. So, Troy continued, before he comes for me, we go for him. Back at Sarah's house, her father had locked the doors, closed the curtains, and sat at the dining table cleaning his old sidearm. He hadn't used a gun in over a decade. His hands were steady. His mind was sharp. Dad, Sarah said softly, are we in danger? He looked at her. Yes. Sarah swallowed. Will they come? Soon, he replied. And when they do, I'll be ready. Sarah walked over and sat beside him. I want to help, she said. He looked surprised. No, Sarah. You're my daughter. I'll keep you safe. She shook her head. You already taught me how to stay calm, how to see danger. I'm not afraid anymore. He looked into her eyes and nodded slowly. You're stronger than I thought. That night, they created a plan. 2 nights later, the attack began. It was just past midnight. The house was quiet. Sarah was asleep upstairs. Her father sat in the living room, fully dressed, the gun holstered at his side. A soft sound came from outside, the crunch of gravel. Then another. He stood up slowly and moved to the window. 3 shadows moved in the darkness. 2 near the fence, 1 near the back. He spoke quietly into his old radio. 3 targets, moving fast. From upstairs, Sarah's voice came through the earpiece he gave her earlier. I see them from the window. 1 has something in his hand, maybe a crowbar. Stay down. Don't move unless I say. Yes, sir. Her voice was calm, just like he'd trained her. Then, bang. The back window shattered. Someone had broken in. The father moved fast, silent like a shadow. His training took over. He stepped into the kitchen and saw a man crawling through the broken glass. Stop right there, he said, pointing the gun. The man froze. Another one came through the hallway. Her father kicked the door shut behind him, trapping him inside. In less than 5 minutes, 2 of the attackers were on the ground, tied up. But there was one more, Troy. He didn't enter the house. He waited outside, watching from the shadows. When he saw his men fail, he cursed and ran. But it was too late, because a black car blocked his path. From it stepped 2 men in suits, the same men who once worked under Sarah's father in the SWAT team, the ones he called for backup. Troy froze. One of the agents smiled. Commander says hello. By morning, everything had changed. The news spread fast. The attackers were arrested. The police found illegal weapons in their car. The school heard what happened. The town heard too. And Sarah, she walked into school that morning with quiet pride. No one dared laugh at her again, because they finally knew she wasn't alone. She had a protector, and they had all messed with the wrong girl. The next morning, everything felt different. The sun rose like any other day, but the energy around Sarah was not the same. When she entered school, the hallway went silent. Eyes followed her. Whispers floated through the air like fog. That's her, the girl from the news. She stopped a break-in, her dad's ex-SWAT. I heard the gang try to hurt her. She doesn't even look scared. Sarah kept walking, head held high. She didn't speak. She didn't smile. She didn't need to. For the first time in a long time, people moved out of her way. No one dared trip her. No one called her names. Even the loud kids, the ones who always laughed too hard, went quiet when she passed. But something still didn't feel right. In the teacher's room, 2 teachers stood near the window, whispering. I saw the footage, said Mrs. Lee, the English teacher. 3 armed men. And she stayed calm, like her father trained her. Why would someone send a gang after a teenage girl? Mr. Harris asked. Mrs. Lee shook her head. It's not about her. It's about him. Her father, someone from his past. They didn't know Sarah was just outside the door, listening. Back at home, her father sat at the kitchen table, laptop open, reading an old file from his SWAT days. He looked tired, lines under his eyes. He hadn't slept much since the attack. Sarah entered quietly. Dad, she said, something's wrong. He looked up. What happened? People at school are acting weird, not just scared, suspicious. Some teachers were whispering. I think they know something. Her father closed the laptop. They should be scared. Whoever's behind this isn't done. But why now? Why us? She asked. He stood up and walked to the window. Before you were born, I led a team that stopped a major operation. We arrested a man named Cade Mercer. He ran guns, drugs, even people. I helped put him in prison. Sarah's eyes widened. Is he still in jail? Her father nodded. He was. But 2 weeks ago, he was released. And you think he sent them? Yes, he said. He's coming back for revenge. But he won't attack me directly. He'll go after what I love most. Sarah looked down. Me. He walked over and placed his hands on her shoulders. but I won't let him hurt you." Meanwhile, in a dark warehouse on the edge of town, Cade Mercer stood surrounded by men. He was older now, but still dangerous. His eyes were sharp, full of hate. "They caught Troy," said one man. "I know," Cade replied coldly. "They say the girl's father called in SWAT contacts. He's protected." Cade laughed, a cruel, empty sound. No one stays protected forever. He picked up a photo from the table, Sarah's school picture. "Let's see how well a father protects his daughter when she disappears." The next day, Sarah's father drove her to school himself. He didn't trust anyone now, not even the police. As she stepped out of the car, he handed her a small black box. "What is it?" she asked. "Press the button if anything feels wrong. It'll send a signal to me and 2 others." Sarah nodded and slipped the device into her pocket. In school, things were quieter, but the silence felt heavier. Even her classmates seemed nervous, like they knew something was coming. At lunch, she sat alone near the window. Her only friend, Mia, finally came over. "Are you okay?" Maya asked softly. Sarah nodded, just thinking. Mia looked around. "I heard more people were watching your house last night." Sarah's eyes narrowed. "Who told you that?" I heard it in the restroom. Some older boys were talking." Sarah stood up. She didn't feel safe anymore, not even in school. That night, her father stayed awake, sitting near the window, gun beside him. At exactly midnight, the house phone rang. He picked it up. "Hello." The voice on the other end was deep cold. "Long time, Commander." His face froze. He recognized that voice. Cade Mercer. "Don't touch my daughter," he said firmly. "I already did," Cade replied, then hung up. Her father rushed upstairs. Sarah's room was empty, her window open, curtain blowing in the wind. Back at the warehouse, Sarah sat tied to a chair, her face bruised but eyes sharp. Cade stood in front of her. "You're braver than I thought," he said. She didn't answer. He leaned closer. "You know what hurts your father more than anything. Not bullets, not pain, but losing you." Sarah looked up. "Then you don't know him at all." Cade laughed again. "Oh, I know him. And when he finds this place, he'll come running. That's when I'll end him." Sarah smiled, just a little. "You really think he'll come alone?" The night was quiet, but inside the house, it felt like a storm. Sarah's father stood in her empty bedroom. His hands shook slightly, but his eyes stayed sharp. The open window told him everything. She had been taken. The phone call still rang in his ears, Cade's voice, cold and cruel. He walked back downstairs, pulled out a black box from under the couch, and placed it on the table. Inside were pieces from his old life: a small pistol, a set of communication devices, an earpiece, a map, and a silver badge from his SWAT days. He stared at the badge for a moment. Then he placed it back in the box and closed it. That part of his life was over. This part, protecting his daughter, was not. Back at the warehouse, Sarah sat quietly, her hands tied, but her mind sharp. She had counted 4 guards outside the door. She listened to their footsteps. One had a limp. Another kept coughing. The one who checked on her had nervous eyes. She remembered what her father taught her. Observe everything before you act. Cade Mercer walked in again. This time, he wasn't smiling. "You know," he said, walking around her chair, "your father cost me everything." Sarah didn't look at him. "I waited years in a dark, cold cell because of him," he growled. "But now he'll feel what I felt. Pain." Sarah finally looked up. "And you'll feel what he gave you. Justice." Meanwhile, Sarah's father stood outside his old friend's house. The door opened slowly. Tom, his ex-partner from SWAT, stood there, older but still strong. "You look like hell," Tom said. "I need your help," Sarah's father said. Tom stepped aside. "I thought you'd never ask." Inside, maps were pulled out. Names were listed, faces remembered. Cade Mercer wasn't just a criminal. He had once been smart, careful, and connected. They figured out where he would go. He had a warehouse on the West Docks, Tom said. Old, hidden, easy to guard. Sarah's father nodded. Then that's where we go. Tom looked at him. Just us. He looked back, face calm but full of fire. She's my daughter. I'm not waiting for backup. At the warehouse, one of the guards opened the door to check on Sarah. She looked weak, head down. He stepped in. That was his mistake. Sarah's eyes snapped open. She kicked him hard in the leg. The one with the limp. He fell, groaning. She grabbed the keys from his belt with her tied hands. It wasn't easy, but she worked the ropes free. By the time another guard came in, she was hiding behind the door. With one sharp move, she slammed a chair into his head. He dropped to the floor. Sarah ran, but alarms went off. Now, they knew she was loose. Outside the warehouse, two shadows moved through the night, silent, fast. Tom took the north side. Sarah's father went in through the back. They had done this before, years ago. Different mission, same danger. Each step he took brought him closer to her. Gun in hand, he moved like a ghost. He took down one guard without a sound. Then another. Then he heard it. A scream. Sarah's scream. Inside, Cade had caught her. She tried to run through the back exit, but two guards blocked the way. He grabbed her by the arm and slapped her hard across the face. "Your father isn't coming," he shouted. But just as he raised his hand again, a loud crack echoed in the air. Cade froze. Then he looked down. A red mark on his shoulder. Blood. A bullet. He turned and saw him. Sarah's father stood at the doorway, calm, steady, weapon raised. "Step away from my daughter," he said. Cade dropped Sarah and backed away. But he didn't give up. He pulled his own gun and fired. Tom burst through the side door at the same time. Bullets flew. Screams filled the air. Sarah crawled behind cover, hands over her head. Then silence. When she looked up, her father was standing over Cade, his gun at Cade's chest. But he didn't shoot. "You're not worth it," he said quietly. Instead, he dropped the gun and grabbed handcuffs from Tom. 10 minutes later, the police arrived. Cade was dragged out, screaming. Sarah and her father sat near an ambulance. She had cuts and bruises, but her smile was strong. "You came," she said. He looked at her with soft eyes. "I always will." The next morning, news spread fast. Everyone knew what had happened. The girl who was never afraid had become a hero. Her father, a former SWAT commander, had become a legend again. But to Sarah, he was just Dad. And that was more than enough. It had been 3 days since the rescue. Sarah was back home. The bruises were healing, but the memories still felt fresh. She sat on the porch with her dog beside her. The town that once ignored her now couldn't stop talking about her. Whispers followed her at school. Some were full of respect. Others were filled with guilt. Because the truth was, they all knew she had been bullied. They all knew her silence wasn't weakness, but they never stood up for her. And now, after everything, they didn't know what to say. In school, the hallway became quiet the moment Sarah entered. People moved aside. Some smiled awkwardly. Some just looked down. She walked straight to her locker, opened it. A note fell out. It wasn't a threat this time. It was an apology. A small piece of paper, handwritten, shaky. "I'm sorry I laughed when they teased you. I was scared. But you were brave. Mia." Sarah folded the note and placed it in her pocket. More would come. But she wasn't looking for apologies. She was waiting for change. Meanwhile, at the police station, something unusual happened. Tom sat across from an officer, giving a statement about the warehouse attack. Sarah's father leaned against the wall, arms crossed. Cade Mercer had been arrested for kidnapping, assault, and multiple past crimes. But that wasn't the only thing making news. It was Sarah's actions, her bravery, her calm. "She's just a kid," the officer said, looking amazed. Tom smiled. "She's her father's daughter." Later that week, Sarah was invited to a local event. The school was honoring acts of courage. She stood on stage, nervous. The crowd was full of people she saw every day, teachers, classmates, neighbors. For the first time, they looked at her with respect. A teacher stepped forward, held out a medal, smiled. "This is for reminding us," she said, "that courage doesn't always shout. Sometimes it walks silently and saves lives." The room clapped. Sarah took the medal. She didn't smile for the cameras. She looked at her father instead. He nodded, and that meant more than any award. But not everyone was happy. In the back of the room, a man in a dark suit stood silently. He watched Sarah closely. Then, he made a phone call. "She's the one," he said. "The girl and the father." There was a pause. Then the man added, "Let's keep an eye on them." He hung up, disappeared into the crowd, and walked away. The next morning, Sarah woke up early. Her father was already in the kitchen, cooking breakfast. He didn't say much, but his eyes kept watching the window. "Dad?" she asked. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "We're safe," he said, "but not everyone likes the truth." Sarah nodded slowly. "Do we need to move again?" He shook his head. "No, this time, we stand." Outside, across the street, the man in the black suit sat in a parked car. He wrote something down in a notebook. Then he looked at a photo, Sarah, standing next to her father, smiling. He sighed. She has no idea what's coming next. He started the car and drove away. The town had gone quiet after the kidnapping incident. People were still talking, of course. Whispers in coffee shops, silent glances at the grocery store, quick nods from neighbors who never used to say hello. Sarah had become something she never expected. A name that carried weight. A girl that strangers talked about. A story parents told their children. But to her, it was just Monday. That morning, Sarah walked to school alone. Her dog, Rocky, stayed home this time. Her father said it was better that way for now. As she passed the bakery, the owner, Mr. Halden, stepped outside. "You want something sweet?" he asked. Sarah stopped, surprised. He had never talked to her before. "I'm okay," she replied politely. He nodded. "On the house. For someone who stood taller than most adults I know." He handed her a warm muffin wrapped in paper. She took it slowly. "Thank you." As she walked away, she didn't notice the man sitting 2 tables down at the cafe. A newspaper in one hand, a camera lens barely peeking out of his bag. He snapped a photo the moment she turned the corner. Back at home, Sarah's father, Marcus, sat at the kitchen table. Papers were spread everywhere. Maps, old team contacts, encrypted flash drives. He wasn't just a father anymore. He was back in commander mode, and something was bothering him. The warehouse attack wasn't just a random act. No ordinary criminal could know how to move like that. No one without training could get through his perimeter. And that meant one thing. Someone had hired ex-military men, and they had failed. Which meant someone else would try again, harder. At school, Sarah was greeted with stares, half smiles, and a few soft thank yous. Even the principal called her into the office, not to scold her, but to shake her hand. "You showed bravery beyond your years," he said. She nodded. "I just didn't want to be afraid anymore." He smiled but looked worried. "If you need anything, anything at all, just ask." Sarah felt strange. People were being kind, but it was still new, still awkward. She didn't know if she liked the attention. She didn't want to be famous. She just wanted to be safe. Later that day, When she got home, Marcus wasn't at the table. She found him in the basement. He was sharpening a knife. His old uniform, his real one, not the civilian one, was laid out on the shelf. "Are you expecting something?" she asked quietly. He looked up. His face was calm, but his eyes were sharp. "Yes," he said. Somewhere across town, a black van was parked near the edge of the woods. Inside sat 3 men. 2 were new faces. 1 was not. "We failed last time," said the man in the front. "We didn't know who we were dealing with." He showed them a photo, Sarah and her father. He was SWAT. Black Team. Ghost Unit. "This changes things." One of the new men leaned back. "Then why go again?" The leader smiled coldly. "Because the people funding this, they don't accept failure." He tapped the photo again. "Next time, we don't knock. We don't speak. We just finish it." At night, Sarah couldn't sleep. She stood by the window, staring into the darkness. Her father joined her a few minutes later. They didn't speak for a while. Then he said softly, "Sometimes the quiet before the storm is the loudest silence of all." She looked up at him. "Are we ready?" she asked. He didn't smile. He just nodded. "Yes." And then, from outside, barely a sound. But Rocky heard it. The dog stood up, ears raised, growling low. Marcus whispered, "They're here." The sun rose slowly over the quiet town. Everything looked peaceful on the outside. But inside one small house, something was not right. Sarah sat at the breakfast table. She was trying to eat, but she wasn't really hungry. Her father, Marcus, stood by the window, watching the street. Rocky, their strong and loyal dog, lay quietly near the door. He didn't bark, but his ears were up. He could feel it too. Something was coming. The peace was only on the surface. It had been 3 days since the last attack. The kidnappers had failed. They had tried to take Sarah, and failed badly. Sarah was okay, but she hadn't smiled since then. Her father had turned their house into a small fortress. Security cameras, reinforced doors, weapons hidden in places no one would expect. He wasn't just being careful. He was preparing. Because Marcus knew something important. The men who failed before were not done yet. Whispers in the shadows. Somewhere in a far, dark building, a phone rang. A man with a scar under his eye picked it up. "Is it done?" a deep voice asked from the other side. "No," the man replied. "The girl is still alive. The father is a problem." There was silence for a moment. Then came the chilling reply. "Send in the cleaner. I want no mistakes this time. No mercy." The man nodded. Understood. He hung up and turned to 2 others. "Tell the team. Gear up. We move tonight." Back at school, Sarah tried to focus in class. The other students still looked at her like she was different, like she was famous or dangerous. Even the teacher was being extra kind to her. But Sarah didn't care. She kept thinking about the night those men came for her, and how her father had moved so fast, like a soldier. She remembered how he didn't hesitate, how his eyes changed. She had never seen him like that before. But now she knew. Her father wasn't just a former SWAT officer. He was something more. The warning. After school, Marcus picked her up himself. They didn't talk much during the drive. But when they got home, he sat her down. "Sarah," he said gently, "I want you to be ready." "For what?" she asked, even though she already knew. "They'll come again," he said. "But this time, it won't be like before. They'll be smarter. They'll be faster. And they won't stop." Sarah looked at him. Her eyes were calm, but strong. "I'm not scared," she said quietly. Marcus smiled. "I know." That night, it was quiet. Too quiet. Sarah brushed her teeth and got ready for bed. Rocky lay near her bedroom door, his eyes watching every shadow. Downstairs, Marcus checked every window and camera feed. Then he paused. He saw it. A light, blinking red. One of the motion sensors was triggered at the back gate. But no alarm sounded. They had cut the power. Marcus moved quickly but silently. He opened a hidden cabinet behind the kitchen wall. Inside, 2 small earpieces, a flashlight, a silencer, and an old knife. He took a deep breath. It was time. In the dark, 3 men moved quietly through the backyard. Black clothes, gloves, no talking. They had one job: get in, grab the girl, disappear. They didn't know who was waiting inside. They didn't know what kind of man Marcus really was. But they were about to find out. The final whisper. Upstairs, Sarah felt something strange. The room suddenly felt colder. The air was still, too still. Rocky stood up. He growled low. And then she heard it. The tiniest click, like someone opening a door downstairs. She whispered, "Dad." No answer. She reached into her desk drawer and pulled out the small walkie-talkie her dad gave her. She pressed the button. "It's starting, isn't it?" The walkie crackled. And then her father's calm voice replied, "Yes. Stay quiet. Don't come out until I say. And no matter what you hear, trust me." The night was darker than usual. Clouds covered the moon. The streetlights flickered. The wind had gone quiet, like even nature was holding its breath. Inside the house, everything looked still. But Marcus was ready. This was not just a home now. It was a battlefield. 3 shadows crossed the fence. The men in black moved like ghosts. No sound, no lights, no fear. One held a stun gun. One had a silencer. The third man carried a bag with ropes and duct tape. They thought it would be easy. Just another job. Just a girl. They had no idea whose door they were about to enter. Inside the house, Sarah sat in her room, her eyes wide open. Rocky growled again, low, steady. He didn't bark. He knew it was time. She didn't scream. She didn't panic. She did what her father taught her. Listen, stay calm, be ready. Downstairs, Marcus stood barefoot in the dark kitchen. He had turned off all the lights himself. He knew the layout better than anyone. And he knew what was coming. The door opens. The back door clicked. Soft, almost like a whisper. The first man stepped inside. Then the second. Then the third. They moved through the kitchen carefully, their flashlights barely on. Then suddenly, one light went out. The man tapped it, confused. Another step forward. Snap. A wire across the floor pulled a shelf down hard. Crash. Before they could speak, Marcus dropped from the ceiling beam above. One move, one hit, one man down. The second man turned to shoot. Too slow. Marcus rolled and kicked the weapon away. Then he punched him so hard the man hit the fridge and dropped like a stone. Upstairs, the third man had rushed toward Sarah's room. Rocky was waiting. The moment the door creaked, Rocky lunged. A growl, a scream, a thud. The man fell back. But Sarah didn't hide. She stood up, grabbed the heavy lamp beside her, and swung it with everything she had. Cray cake. Silence. Rocky stood beside her, ready for more. The final step. Marcus dragged the 2 men into the living room. The third was already unconscious at the stairs. He tied their hands. Then he pulled out his phone. Not to call the police, not yet. Instead, he opened a small app. He tapped one button. A live video started recording. He looked straight into the camera. To the people who sent them, this is your warning. He turned the camera toward the 3 broken men on the floor. You touched my daughter once. You tried again. Next time, I come for you. He sent the video directly to the same number that had texted the first threat. Police arrive. Too late. 5 minutes later, sirens filled the street. Neighbors watched from their windows, whispering. Officers ran in, only to stop in shock. 3 men on the ground, 1 man standing calmly, and a girl holding her dog with no fear in her eyes. "Sir, are you okay?" an officer asked. Marcus nodded. They broke in. The captain arrived soon after. He looked at the scene and sighed. "You used to be SWAT, right?" he asked quietly. Marcus nodded again. The captain smirked. "Well, I guess they picked the wrong house." Next morning, the story hit the news by sunrise. Former SWAT commander stops armed intruders in home invasion. Daughter safe after brave stand with father and dog. The town was buzzing. People who had once ignored Sarah now looked at her with respect. Teachers were proud. Classmates were stunned. But Sarah didn't want attention. She just wanted peace. Back at home. Later that day, she sat on the porch with her father. Rocky lay between them, resting his head on Sarah's foot. "Are they gone for good?" she asked softly. Marcus looked out at the sky. "No," he said honestly. "But now they know who we are." Sarah nodded. "I'm not scared anymore." He smiled, proud. "You never were." The house was calm again. Morning light touched the windows softly. The smell of fresh coffee floated in the air. But the peace in the home was no longer the same as before. It was stronger now, like a shield. Sarah stood at the window, holding her mug. Her eyes looked calm. But inside, she had changed. She wasn't just the quiet girl anymore. She wasn't just someone's daughter. She had faced fear, and she didn't run. Behind her, Marcus walked in, slow and steady. He looked at his daughter for a moment. She looked like her mother, strong, graceful, and brave. "You okay?" he asked. Sarah nodded. "Yeah, I am now." He handed her a small silver box. "What's this?" she asked, confused. "Something your mom wanted you to have. I was waiting for the right time. Now, you've earned it." Sarah opened it slowly. Inside was a simple necklace with a tiny badge charm. On the back, it was engraved. "Be brave. Be still. Be stronger than fear." Tears filled her eyes. "She wore this the day I first met her," Marcus said, smiling softly. "She was working undercover, surrounded by danger, but she never shook, just like you." Sarah held the necklace close to her heart. Outside, a black SUV parked across the street. Marcus saw it. He didn't panic. He didn't move fast. He just walked to the door, opened it, and stood there. 2 men stepped out of the SUV. They wore black suits, dark glasses. They didn't speak. Marcus walked halfway across the yard. "I sent the message," he said firmly. "This is your answer." The men looked at each other. Then, they turned back, got into the car, and drove away. No words, no threats, just silence. Because now, they knew. They knew this wasn't just any family. This wasn't just a father. This was a protector, a former SWAT commander, a man who would go farther than anyone to defend what he loved. That night, Sarah, Marcus, and Rocky sat in the backyard. The stars were out. The sky was clear. "Will they ever come back?" Sarah asked. Marcus looked up. "If they do," he said, "they'll learn again what they forgot the first time." "What's that?" He looked at her. "That the quiet ones are usually the most dangerous." Sarah smiled. Rocky barked once, as if agreeing. And together, they sat in peace, not just as a family, but as a team that no one would ever dare threaten again.